Today's episode is all about the power of heirloom recipes, their ability to preserve history, bring people together, and remind us of the generations who came before us. To explore this, I am joined by someone who truly lives and breathes this philosophy, Darien Rozell of Pantry Hill. Darien and her family have deep roots in upstate New York, where they have built a life centered around food, tradition, and the land they call home. Today, through her brand, Pantry Hill, Darien has dedicated herself to preserving and sharing the cooking, gardening, and entertaining traditions that have been passed down, some more recently than others, through her family. In this episode, we'll talk about the importance of heirloom recipes, not just as ingredients and instructions, but as a way of connecting with our past. Darien shares how her family's culinary heritage inspired the creation of Pantry Hill's brand at large, and how she is now passing these traditions down to her own children, and how we can all bring a little more meaning into our homes. Pour yourself a cup of tea, which will become a significant talking point in just a little while. Get comfortable, and let's get started. Welcome to Grandma's Silver, where tradition meets today. I'm Allie, your host of the Grandma Silver podcast and founder of the Grand Millennial Lifestyle. Here, we blend aesthetics with nostalgia, engaging in conversations with lifestyle brands, designers, and more to rediscover the timeless charm of the past. Join me as we journey from home to heart, illuminating the past and polishing the present with the gleam of Grandma Silver. Darien, welcome.
Hi, Allie. Thank you so much for having me.
Of course. I'm super thrilled to have you. Thank you for coming on. I want to just turn this your way for a second because I want you to be able to introduce yourself and tell people who you are, but also Pantry Hill. I know it's your home, but it's also kind of evolved into this amazing heritage-driven brand. So could you give people a little background?
Yeah. Okay. So I'm Darien Rozell, and I started this whole concept for Pantry Hill actually began a while ago because my husband and I, after college, moved away and found ourselves being drawn back to this area when we started thinking about having a family. So the Saratoga Springs area. We ended up landing here. And I was in editorial. So I was working in magazines and I was a digital editor. And after, so many years of doing that and being with my boys and I was working remote and, I decided that it was time for me to kind of step back from that a little bit. We were living here on this property. My husband and I casually and just like privately had named it Pantry Hill, just based on our interests. We love to garden, we love to cook. And so we did that for like 3 years, right? Without saying anything to anybody. And then I left my job and took about a year off. And then after a year, I was just like, you know what? All of those skills that I was using in my editorial job, like I think I have a story here that I can kind of tell online. And so I just started documenting our days and telling a very editorialized version of what's happening here in our lives. I started doing that right around the time, that the pandemic happened. And so I actually launched our Instagram account in March of 2020. That kind of was like a catalyst for, the conversations and what I was writing about people were focusing on at that time, turning back to their homes, starting gardens. People had more time to tune in. And so I think it just happened kind of at the right time. I gave myself like 6 months to say, like, if I can grow this to 10,000 followers in 6 months, then I kind of feel like I have something and it'll give me a little bit of something to focus on, for myself, my own kind of like creative side project. And so, not only are we telling the story of our life here, the story of coming home, the story of our family history and our legacy, it's sort of evolving into this lifestyle brand, which has been so fun. It's sort of like in the last year, I had visions for that maybe in the future. When we started talking about like naming our home and all the things we were doing here, I was like, I could see this like becoming something like that. I'm just going to start telling our story and see what happens. And I was like, when the boys are in school, maybe I'll be able to dive into it more as a business. Just in the last year, it kind of has taken on a life of its own, which has been really amazing, like a little bit scary. It was kind of a thing where it was like everything in the universe right now is telling me that I should be focusing more energy on this a little bit. So
Yeah.
right now we're in the phase where we're trying to balance family life because I'm not willing to give up that kind of lifestyle that we've built for ourselves and our boys with turning this into more of a lifestyle brand and business.
I love that. And I also love that you just touched on the fact that it really launched almost 5 years to the week at the time of our recording this. That was kind of the catalyst for my own brand
Yeah.
because I think we all were craving just simplicity, like you mentioned, a little bit of we needed happy. Like for me, my brand was very interiors based at first, and
Yeah.
so it was a lot of sharing color and just like that nostalgia. And it's
Just a little bit of an
incredible.
escape, right? Like a little bit of an escape
100%.
from like everything that was happening, you
A
know?
100%. That was that my Instagram feed was like where I was going, right?
Yeah.
And that really hasn't shifted that drastically. Like those are still the things we're all working on getting back to. I think even maybe now more so than even in 2020, because I think we launched back so quickly and we tried to like regain our new normal so quickly. And then we realized, oh, this is kind of the worst. We don't
Yeah.
like, and we
Yeah.
actually really liked some of those elements. And I just see this resurgence in people appreciating all of these elements that we're touching on today, and I
Yeah.
love that it's reflected in your growth.
Yeah. And well, and I think, for us, I started sharing at the right time, but this is like legitimately the lifestyle that we live, right? We
Right.
have worked, my husband and I worked really hard to get to the point in all of this time that we had like moved away and we were working jobs in Seattle and in Boston and like in cities. And, we kept asking ourselves, like, what does success look like to us? Ultimately, like the answer was success looks like coming home.
Mm.
And so we tried to make sure that that was kind of like our end goal in everything that we were doing. It is very natural. This was the lifestyle we were going to live anyway. So it very naturally has been, it's just been I found it easy to tell the story because it just feels
It's authentic.
authentic. I hate saying the word authentic because I feel like it's overused and it's overused in a way to kind of be like, no, look at me, I'm being authentic. Like, which is something that I go back and forth with because like my Instagram and the things that I presented are professional. Like that's just my background. My professional career was spent in kind of presenting things with a magazine lens.
It's the
So
aesthetic.
like very aesthetically
Yes.
pleasing and I love that. I love the creative challenge of saying like how do we take our life and what we're doing here and put this like beautiful filter over it, right? But I think that a little bit like we've gotten to the point now that we're building this like lifestyle brand and people are like, well, how? Like how are you doing this, right? That is such an exciting part of the process for me too. We actually signed with a production company a few months ago. And so we are working on a YouTube show, kind of just pulling back the curtain a little bit. How are we
Yeah.
doing this? Why are we doing this? What's the meaning behind it all? And telling that story of how, like, our friends and our family and our community, they're so involved in helping us create this sense of home.
Hmm.
And we're utilizing the skills of our ancestors and, like I said, all of the people around us. And all of that is kind of helping us create this place where everyone wants to gather. And so ultimately, that's what the show is going to be about.
We'll talk more about that in one
Yeah.
second, but I do just want to touch on the fact that I think going back to sort of what you're saying, I love your transparency about it being editorialized and
Mhm.
this focus on aesthetic because ultimately the brand is your work. I
Yeah.
think sometimes people are given, flack for, oh, you're like giving us this tiny little glimpse of your life, but it's not that pretty. And
Mhm.
yeah, that's the point. Like we're romanticizing these elements. You still do laundry. You're still a mom of three
Yeah.
boys.
Yeah.
like you still live a life.
I don't feel like my best self in general when my life is a mess, right? So you're like,
Who
I'm
does?
not going to show you that side of it. Like, of course it exists. Like,
Right.
I mean, like, even right now, I'm talking to you, like, sitting surrounded by piles of laundry. Like,
Yeah.
I mean, that's just like the reality of it all. But like, that's not the part that I find beautiful and interesting. And that's fine. So, I'm not saying with our YouTube that like show that you're going to be seeing all of that mess, but you're going to be seeing more of the process of how we're getting to the point where it feels like, how did you, if you we're tapping maple trees and there's like a bunch of mess around that and how's it working and we're trying to figure it out and we're asking our friends and family who have done it before. And so like that to me is like kind of the messy part, right? Is like
Right.
how do we figure this out, right?
Journey,
Utilizing the
the
information
journey of
from
it
our,
all.
right? And it's presented in this like beautiful manner when we get to the Instagram account and you're like, "Oh my gosh, that sounds so lovely." But it's like it took all of this to get there.
Yes, and but that's a beautiful part of the process.
Yeah.
Because people want to, I mean, I think Instagram is perfect for that end result. The same way that interior designers, I mean, they'll post maybe Instagram stories of some of the background, but
Yeah.
the average person already knows what the before looks like.
Yeah.
We want to see the after. But I love that behind the scenes, that glimpse of your journey to getting to the end result and bringing
Yeah.
people along and acknowledging that everyone has to learn.
There's so much growth that happens in the process.
Yeah.
We're not claiming to be experts on anything.
Yeah,
Like
yeah.
here, even with the garden and all of that, we're learning. And so, like, yes, I've been doing some of it for like we've lived here for 8 years. So some of it I have kind of like become proficient at. But there's still things that we're learning and, we're learning and we're growing and we're doing. And so we kind of want to bring people along on that a little bit.
I'm so
So,
excited. Well, I don't know that you actually dropped the name, but since we're here and we're talking about it, why don't you tell people the name and if you wanted to add a little bit extra? So I think it's a good segue into the rest of our conversation because it's such a
yeah.
natural fit for all of this.
Yeah, so the show is called Afternoon Tea, and we are working with Bright-Sided Media. The concept for afternoon tea comes from this, casually in my family, we drop into each other's houses for afternoon tea. This isn't like a formal sit down, like we're gonna have a three-tier like cakes and little sandwiches. Afternoon tea to us is just popping by to catch up with each other. I practiced afternoon tea with my mom and my grandmother the entire time I was growing up. And so that's something that we have, continued with our boys. It's a chance for us to kind of just pause in the afternoon and either connect with one another or if you're by yourself, like kind of take that like mindful time to connect with yourself. The concept for the show is to kind of invite the viewers to pop on over for afternoon tea. Come on over, let's catch up, and to kind of give you that more like intimate feel of understanding what's going on. But also, literally, I hope that people will make it a ritual, right? So when the show launches and they want to watch an episode, they sit down and they pour themselves a cup of tea, and it's kind of just this like feel good chance to kind of relax and decompress. And yeah,
I'm so excited. I will be an avid viewer for sure. I
I'm so
think
excited
too,
too.
obviously I talk a lot about tradition here, easy ways to reincorporate those into our lives,
Yeah.
especially because we're in such a go, 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 like don't sit down kind of society. And I love that not only are you encouraging people to sit down and do that in-person communication and reconnection with folks, but that you share that with your children, you pass it
Yeah.
down, and that now in this way you're sharing it with a broader community of people. I think that's so special.
Hopefully what comes out of it is that people, and this is part of one of my biggest messages with Pantry Hill, is that tradition doesn't have to be complicated, right? It's just something that you can commit to. We have elaborate traditions that we've followed for like generations, which is really cool. And I feel like a lot of people have been, interested in that. And I love sharing that. But also, like at a smaller scale, the traditions of afternoon tea are so simple. We'll grab a handful of pretzels with our afternoon tea. Sometimes it's home baked cookies. What matters is that it's something that you enjoy, it's something that you can stick with, and it's something that bring you and the people around you together.
So, shameless plug, but encouraging people to sit down for a cup of tea. You are working on a tea blend collaboration. Could you speak to that a little?
Yeah, I'm so excited. I am working with Saratoga Tea and Honey Company to put together a Pantry Hill exclusive blend. I am working with the owner of Saratoga Tea and Honey. Her name is Haley Stevens, and she's been a part of our Pantry Hill story for many years. When I first started my pie making workshops, which we can talk about in a little bit. She was one of the first women that I invited. I invited a group of there's 12 women in business in town who I really trusted to sit down and say, like, this is my concept. This is what I'm interested in doing. What are your thoughts? Right. And so Haley was part of that group. And so she has kind of been part of our story all along. And then this past fall, we sat down on my porch and we were having some of her tea. And, I was like, Haley, what do you think about doing a Pantry Hill blend? And so this whole kind of concept was built around just this like really beautiful friendship that we've had. The tea is it's called the Pantry Hill blend. The concept for it was we wanted it to feel like a cup of home. So it is a black tea, but it's like maple, ginger, cinnamon, cardamom, just like really
So
warm, cozy,
good.
right? Really warm, cozy feeling tea. All of this kind of started happening at the same time. So this concept of the show for afternoon tea and then the actual like physical tea blend that we're working on all just kind of felt serendipitous. All the right pieces were falling into place at the right time. So,
It's so exciting, and I'm really
yeah.
excited to watch, obviously, your brand continue to grow, but all the fun things that you do along the way. Now, of course, as someone who has followed your brand for a while, and as someone who personally connects food with love, and
Mhm.
I'm a big cook, and that's just something that I appreciate. You share a lot of recipes, particularly, I would say heirloom. I don't,
Yeah.
correct me if I'm wrong.
Uh-huh.
How would you define an heirloom recipe?
I would say that an heirloom recipe is a recipe that really has stood the test of time. So we have different levels, I guess, of what you would
Yeah.
call heirloom recipes, right? Some of them are cornerstones of all of our family celebrations, and they have been for generations. And so those are like really, like the pies, right? The pie crust, my great grandmother's pie crust. Like that is something that is incredibly meaningful, and those pies are at a lot of our family celebrations. And then there's like other heirloom recipes where you're like, this is just kind of like a quick dinner that my great grandmother made or my grandmother used to make, but this was how she fed her family of six, fast. And so that's something that we use too. So it's not necessarily fancy, it's just something that was easy and has stood the test of time and hasn't gone away. Most of our recipes and most of our heirloom recipes are handwritten on, note cards or napkins or, just like scraps of paper. My grandmother has this like beautiful collection of all of these recipes that are handwritten. Some of them were written out on typewriters. We have my great grandmother's like Slavish cakes that, somebody had typed out on this really old piece of paper at some point. I think that collection in itself has kind of become its like own heirloom. So we've tried to maintain that with Pantry Hill. If I was going to openly share these recipes on social media, it felt like I wasn't really honoring the legacy of, my family members. And so like social media is just so quick and things turn over so fast and it's so easy to copy and paste and call your own and like it's just like sharing in that way didn't feel like our tradition of writing these things down and passing them to each other
Mhm.
handwritten, which you would do at like a party. You would go to a party and you'd have a salad and you would say like, this is amazing. Do you have the recipe for it? And somebody would write it down and give it to you. And so I wanted to kind of maintain that integrity of the recipes. So I started a newsletter. The newsletter is how I share most of those recipes. And that felt like just more of an intimate exchange, I think, with some of my followers. I also, and we're going to dive into this a little bit with the show, sharing some more of those just like kind of everyday recipes. And there's a ton of those too. Yeah, I don't know. Cooking is so fun. Like you said, food
I
is
love
love.
it.
That's
It
what we
is.
do here. That's our reason for gathering, right?
Well, I was just about to hit on that because I think it also, again, for me as someone, I'm a former event planner. I love everything about getting people together for no reason at all or a big reason. I think it's a unifier and it
Totally.
connects us. And
Hmm.
I love particularly heirloom recipes that have stories. I mean, honestly, every recipe has a story, but heirloom recipes, things that are tradition based or from your family, I love being able to bring people together and share those things because I also think you're sharing part of yourself.
Okay, I love that you touched on that it doesn't have to be like elaborate. It's just a reason for gathering, no matter how big or how small, or, it's unifying, right? And that is kind of the concept of afternoon tea. Like we're sitting down around this like thing that is so simple, but the framework for afternoon tea is what we're gathering around. It's giving us a reason for getting together, for popping over, and for pausing during our day. And then you also said that with a recipe, you're sharing part of your story, but I also think that those recipes kind of become a part of our identity, right?
Yes.
Because it's like, this is where I come from, or this is where my grandparents came from. And so it's kind of like the concept of creating home. Whether you live in your hometown or you live in an old family home, you can create home and create that feeling utilizing some of these, like, this is where I came from concepts, right? And so one of those things is
100%.
recipes. Maybe you're away from home, but you have your great grandmother's spaghetti recipe. And every time you make that spaghetti, your house smells like your grandmother. And building this concept of this is who I am, this is where I came from, I think it just creates this kind of sense of belonging.
You touched on something so important, which is that it connects us to a sense of place, even if it wasn't our place,
Yeah.
our people. We have a cookie recipe around the holidays that everyone, it was kind of like this folklore, but it was lost with my grandmother when she passed. I mean, I was in elementary school, I was young. And so for much of my life, I was just hearing about these cookies. And she had this cookbook, and I found the recipe in the cookbook that was passed down to me. It was not really legible. I wish I could work from her
Yeah.
recipe specifically, but just to have that and then to be able to put the pieces together to find what that was. Ultimately, we found out it's called a cucciadata cookie, which is like the Sicilian Italian Christmas cookie
Wow.
that has
Yeah.
fig and stuff. And so it was really honestly emotional when I was able to make that and share that with my mom and her
Yeah.
family members, because that was something that really connected them
Yeah. So it not
to
only
this
honors
past.
her legacy, like your grandmother's legacy and her memory, but it's connecting your family members with where they came from. Food has an amazing ability to do that. I think that home has an amazing ability to do that, but I think that you can create home with food.
100%.
So I get that question a lot about what would you say to somebody looking to create something like Pantry Hill, right? And I say, you have to figure out what your priorities are. You don't have to be living in the countryside near your family. It's like, everybody's circumstances are different at different times, but you do what you have to do at the time to make where you're at feel like home.
Mm.
And I think that that is easily done with recipes.
Yeah, you have so many. But as we're, specifically entering a warmer weather season, are there things that you look forward to making this time of the year? I know we're coming up on the holidays are a little more spread out,
Yeah.
but we're coming up on things like Easter,
Yep.
4th of July, like these summery Memorial
Yeah.
Day. So do you
Yeah.
have things that you are looking forward to making?
Our next big, like, kind of holiday, is Easter. There are several recipes that I really look forward to with that. My grandmother always kind of did Easter, and we've taken it over in the last few years. But we also have taken over a lot of these, like, kind of family traditions and gatherings, and people are always like, "Oh my gosh, that seems like so much." Yes, I'm hosting them here, but my mom, my aunt, like my grandmother, still, like, everyone is contributing. I'm not doing all of the things, right?
Right.
So for Easter, we have my aunt makes these delicious scalloped potatoes. So she
Mhm.
mixes russet potatoes and sweet potatoes. And so I love that recipe. I don't think that heirloom necessarily means that it has to be old, right? It has to
Right.
stand the test of time, and it has to be something that's part of a celebration and something that's repeated year after year, something that's tied to memories, right?
Yep.
And so one of those is my mom's carrot cake, and it is so good. Like, sometimes I'll ask her to make it. Like, she usually makes it for Easter, but sometimes I'll ask her to make it for me for my birthday in August because it's like it's that good.
Yeah.
Um,
I love carrot cake. I eat it any time of the year, so I'm right
I
there
love
with
it.
you.
Me too.
So
It's so
good.
good. So I always look forward to that. Our whole Easter dinner, I think, is really good. It's kind of like a celebration of spring. But
Yeah.
I've also really gotten into my dad started growing asparagus. Which,
Oh,
like, in his retirement, he got into like his own kind of vegetable gardening. When I grew up, my mom and my grandmother are like, their gardens were like gorgeous flower gardens, right? And that was where they spent a majority of their time. We had a small vegetable patch when I was a kid, but my dad, since he retired, is now the one who has gotten into this, like, vegetable gardening. So he started an asparagus patch. That has gotten me really into making asparagus soup. I love asparagus soup.
that sounds good.
It's just like so simple and it tastes like spring and it's fresh at a time where there is not a lot available
Yeah. Like when you're
out there.
like right now when we're desperate for we
Yeah,
were
like
talking
right.
pre-recording about just
I
being
know.
eager for the sun. Yeah.
Yeah, eager for the sun and just, I mean, up here, our frost date, like where you're at, it's a little bit earlier, but our frost date up here is technically Memorial Day weekend. I think maybe in the last couple of years it's moved up a weekend, but like
Yeah.
we've gotten snow in May before here.
We
So
we had a really bad frost several years ago. Ours is generally like our rule of thumb here in the Philadelphia suburbs is they say Mother's Day, but that has
yeah,
proven to be pretty inaccurate at this point. We usually
yeah.
wait until maybe a week. I generally will wait until almost Memorial Day unless it's something that I know is fairly hardy
So
because we just never know.
that is like kind of us too. So I'm the type of gardener where like I love it, but I also garden out of convenience. Like I am not a seed starter. I don't
Yeah.
like so I'm not sowing seeds right now. Everything that is sown by seed here is direct sown. Anything else that needs to be started ahead of time and kind of really technically needs a warmer climate, I buy from the local nursery. I buy like little starts because they just don't grow strong enough and fast enough here to be able to harvest anything from them in any period of time, reasonable period of time. We direct sow a lot and we do root vegetables, and so that will all get started. I probably can start spinach, like those kinds of things.
I was going to ask you because you are a mom, and a big part of this conversation, of course, is, passing things down. Again, not necessarily in any particular span of time, but are you finding that your children are now picking up on this concept of, even grandmom is going to be bringing carrot cake on Easter, or, like, are
Yeah.
they asking for
I think
certain
that
things?
that is a way, that's such a special way to get kids to look forward to things. And so we try to live close to the seasons and nature. A part of that is just kind of following those cycles and saying that, like, these are the things that we make during this time. Get the kids excited about, Mimi's carrot cake, because that's all part of the changing seasons. They absolutely look forward to all of the things that we do. I mean, especially at the holidays, but throughout the year. In the summer, they love making jam. And so when we get to berry season, they're so excited about making jam. And my husband makes pickles with them. So they love like making dilly beans and kind of have an heirloom like dilly bean recipe that they look forward to helping him make. So I think it's just a wonderful way to kind of tell the stories of the seasons and to inform our kids about, again, our family history and nature in general.
I have to imagine because you've touched on having some handwritten things and
Mhm.
and typed up things, and so do you have a collection of these recipes? And also for folks who might be interested, maybe they have something passed down here or there, but they're interested in kind of starting to consolidate some of this stuff. Like, do you have a method that you've found has worked for you for kind of getting some of these recipes from people?
Here's the thing. I think I inherited my mom's like disorganization for recipes. And I always thought that, and my grandma's the same way. I always thought that looking through my mom's recipes, like sometimes she would, oh, I can't, like it would take her forever to find my great grandmother's frosting recipe in her pile of like, because like I said, everything is just kind of like a casual, like, oh my gosh, I love this. Will you write it down? Or
Yes.
my mom is like, I need grandma's recipe. So she picks up the phone and she calls my grandmother and she's, asking. And so she's writing things down. So everything just kind of gets thrown into this pile, box, recipe book that's like bursting at the seams, right?
Yep.
And so when I got married, my mom put together a cookbook for me. And it had a lot of our like kind of regular family recipes and it was spiral bound. And that was awesome. But like it didn't have everything. And so I
Right.
found that I've started just shoving things into it. It's like one of those moments where you're like, oh my God, I am my mother. you know? And like
I love
I'm always like, guys, I can't find this. I wish that I had a better method. My grandmother is doing the same thing, except the recipes that she's rifling through when she's looking are legitimately the ones that were like handwritten by my great great grandmother
the
and
original.
the original ones. And so
Yeah.
I have actually taken a few of the really important ones, like the pasta that we make for Christmas, and I've taken a picture of it and kind of recreated the index card that it
Okay.
was that my great grandmother wrote it on, and I reprinted that for all of the women in my family, and then we framed it. And so everybody has it in their kitchen. I love the tangibility of recipes. I'm not really like, I don't love having my computer out or like using my
I
phone when
know.
I'm cooking. And like someday I would really love to consolidate them into something like beautiful. I would love to take actual photographs of every single one of those recipes and put them into an actual album. So I'm
Yeah.
not rifling through kind of all of those like old cards and stuff.
Well, let's just throw it out there now while we're on a roll and you're
I
growing.
know.
Let's put a cookbook together.
I
Should
know. Well,
we?
that's, I mean, I would love to do like a legitimate cookbook. I feel like that's probably one of my goals in life. I feel like the one way that I could truly honor these recipes by sharing them with like the larger public would be to do something like that,
Yeah.
right? To kind of like tell our family story as we're sharing those recipes.
We were talking a minute ago about some of these different recipes, and I know that especially, you touched on jam, which got me thinking, oh, right, I want to ask you about your pie workshops. Tell me more about how this came to fruition.
I started telling the story of Pantry Hill on social media, but to me, the story is so personal. That almost didn't seem like enough. I felt like it needed to be more tangible than that. Maybe I can use one of these recipes to bring people together in a real way and give people a chance to kind of come behind the scenes a little bit. The idea of pies, pie, like I said, is like a cornerstone of a lot of our family celebrations. And it's also seasonal, using a lot of the produce that we're growing here or that, our local farmers are growing. It's my great grandmother's crust recipe, and she raised her 6 kids in Saratoga. It kind of has been really cool to invite people to come here to Saratoga to learn her methods and her recipe. And it's just been such a great way to connect with people. And like it's been so meaningful to me. But what I'm finding is that the people who are coming for a reason of their own. Like I had one woman tell me last year that she signed up for my blueberry pie workshop because her grandfather loved blueberry pie. And so she
Oh,
wanted to come and, kind of learn how to remake that, even though her grandfather was no longer with us, because it reminded her of him. This will be our 4th year going into it. People are taking these recipes and then they're going home and they're sharing these recipes with their friends and their family. And these pies are sitting at people's tables across the country, which is so crazy to me. Like what a way to honor that legacy. So, and I have people sharing pictures of it and, kind of like reconnecting with what we're doing here, even though they haven't been here in a year or so. We have legitimately like opened our doors to our kitchen the last 3 years that we've done this. That was awesome. And I loved doing that. It's a ton of work to
I'm sure.
to just get our house prepared, right? In a way that like you're expecting to see from our Instagram. And like I understand that people understand that it's our home and things like that, but also like there's this level of just kind of professionalism that I feel like I have to deliver and feel like I've invited people into kind of this storybook with my Instagram, and so I want them to feel that when they come here. But to create I'm like, I have 3 boys. They live here, like their stuff is all over the place. So it takes us about a week and a team of 9 people. And so we were just kind of like, this is a lot. In the back of our mind, for about 8 years, we've been planning and saving to put a barn on our property. The purpose of the barn has kind of evolved over time, like an extra entertaining space, an office space. Like my husband also works from home, just kind of an accessory building for us. And so, as Pantry Hill has evolved and these workshops have evolved, the barn should be used more as a studio space for Pantry Hill. And so, I think that'll kind of like alleviate the stress of inviting people.
It's special to have them on your property. That's still your space.
Yeah,
There's still a level of hospitality involved there, even if it wasn't on your property.
yeah,
So it's like this, it's the same concept. So I think that's really
for
still
sure. And
just
it's
as
just like
special.
for me, it's just like, but I'll be able to separate like so much of my work and my life is intertwined at this point. I'll be able to kind of like hopefully mentally separate a little bit. Like we'll be using that for that space for filming, and I think it's just going to be really like overall a healthy move for all of us. But yeah, I'm really excited. So I just announced our pie workshops for 2025. We moved them all to the fall this year because we're currently in the process of building the barn. But also my fall workshops are some of my most popular. I think that just like the north, like people visiting the Northeast during like leaf season, and just like apple pies and just kind of that like warm, cozy concept really drew people to that time of year.
Pie is nostalgic in general.
Pie
So
is
that
nostalgic
makes
in general.
perfect sense.
Everybody has a story about it, right? Whether they've made
Yeah.
it before or they've had it from somewhere else, or that's also a really nostalgic time of year. I also feel like it's Pantry Hill's season. Like that is when we're harvesting from the garden and all of the trees look beautiful. And so I increased the number of workshops by two. I added two extras, so 24 extra spots. So I had 60 total spots and they sold out within days. When I started them, I expected it to reach people locally, friends
Right.
of friends, my mom's teacher friends, people who are looking to do things as a group and just kind of like casually doing them like that. The reach that I had on social media has kind of pulled people in from so many different places. And we've hosted people, most like 80% of the people who are coming to visit are coming from out of state. It's just crazy. It's really
That's so
cool.
fun.
And we live
Mhm.
in like such a beautiful like tourist community as it is. So Saratoga Springs has kind of like that infrastructure to support people coming to
Tourism.
visit,
Yeah.
right? There's the beautiful hotels and it all kind of just like fits the aesthetic of what I'm doing around here. So you can stay in a beautiful historic hotel in town and walk Broadway and then drive 6 minutes north to like our little kind of country homestead and make pie.
You told the story about the woman who attended the blueberry pie workshop. There was that personal connection for her. It wasn't her recipe, and yet it still connected her to her family history.
Yeah.
And I think that's so important because I think there are people out there, perhaps even listening, who are maybe not even people who are, like you and I are wanting to cook or enjoying that or having things that are passed down to them. People's backgrounds are all over the place. People lose things in fires and like there's so much that goes into connecting to your past, right? I think it's so special that you can take a memory and still learn and
Right?
still find a way. Like, even if you're not someone who knows how to bake, you could do something like a pie workshop and it still will trigger that happy feeling.
Yeah.
And it allows you to feel connected, even if it's not that specific recipe.
That concept of being able to build your own legacy. You don't have to have this longevity in any of these traditions and the things that you're practicing, or even like the memories that you have. You can use your past to inform your future, right? So
Yes.
you can use that memory of your grandfather and the fact that he loved blueberry pie to inform yourself of how you can bring that back into the fold and into your home in the future. And so you can do that by like seeking out the knowledge that you need in order to
Yes.
kind of like pull that back into your home. And so I really hope that with our pie workshops and the things that we're sharing on social media and this new show, that is the main message that people are going to take away from this. It doesn't have to be all of it at once. It can be as simple as learning how to make a pie, right? Because it reminds you of
Mhm.
your grandfather.
One of the questions I was going to ask you, and this is not recipe based, but of course your brand, and you've mentioned it is editorialized, but there is an aesthetic to it. And so much of that aesthetic is that you've welcomed us as viewers into your home. Now, of course, a lot of that becomes stylized as you're shooting, but also you have to have a very beautiful starting point, which is your home. How would you define maybe like your style a little bit? Because of course we love to talk about design here, but also if we're talking about heritage inspired heirloom, are there objects that have sentimental value to you that you have in your home or that you wanted to touch on?
Yeah, I mean, I think that everything that we do here at Pantry Hill has just kind of been drawn from our history. And that was really important to me to kind of give our boys a sense of like surround them with this feeling of like, this is where I belong. This is where I came from. This is where my family came from. This is who we are. And we are fortunate to be in the same town as like our family and all of that. But I think that you can do that just with the objects and kind of things that are important to you. Ultimately, like, my main goal is to make a space that feels cozy. And cozy to me also means aesthetically pleasing. More so to me than I think it does probably to like my boys or my family. But I've used a lot of my mom and my grandmother and my aunt. They have all have like beautiful homes, right? And so I've just kind of always lived in this world. So I've always been interested in these things, watching them kind of like create and build their own homes. And so my home is kind of like a version of theirs. Eric's family has a beautiful historic camp that has informed some of the decisions that I've made here. It's like a craftsman style camp, and our home is kind of like a craftsman style home. So I've pulled a lot of things from that. Also, like incorporating objects, like so much of what we have here has a tie to family, whether it's old. My grandmother for Christmas this year gifted me my great grandmother's silverware that she
Wow.
carried. It was her wedding silverware that she carried on the ship from Sweden to the States, obviously, so it was very meaningful to her. And so she gave that to me for Christmas this year. And so those obviously mean a lot. I have some of the same grandmother's like stoneware, some transferware stuff. So I love those things. We actually do use them because I feel like that's really important, right? I think that she would want us to use them. The point is that they're being used and loved. But then we have, speaking of legacy, like so much of what I have in my house. My mom has helped me wallpaper. My father-in-law has done so many awesome, just kind of like millwork projects around the house. He's doing the laundry room right now, like as we speak. My grandmother has made curtains and pillows, and everywhere I look, there's a story tied to our family. And I don't necessarily think that like you have to have your great grandmother's silverware, right? But I do believe in investing in objects that will stand the test of time. If you have to buy those objects new, or you find them at an antique shop or whatever, like someday those objects could become your family's legacy.
It all has to start somewhere. Yeah.
Exactly. So,
Yeah.
like, if you're investing in beautiful things that make you happy, and your children and your grandchildren, and like they see you using the same cast iron pot for every holiday, maybe that was something that you registered for your wedding. It's not like a family heirloom, but like it could become a family heirloom. And those are the
Yeah.
things that make a home, and those are the things that tell the story.
I hear people talk all the time, or even folks I know personally who, maybe someone passes or they're downsizing, and their one request is, the cast iron skillet or
Yeah.
the casserole dish that was used every Sunday, for Sunday supper, or, all those sorts of things that just like those are the not that, and I always kind of disclaim this, like I never promote heritage inspired or objects or, things to sound materialistic, but I
Yeah.
think there are stories connected to them. It doesn't have to be expensive. It doesn't have to be fancy. It could honestly be an eyesore, but if you love it
Yeah.
and it makes you happy, I love hearing when people are talking about, like wanting those things because of the story behind it or the special connection that it has.
And that's how those things become heirlooms, right? Is
Yeah.
because you saw the joy that it brought your grandmother, or you saw how like this skillet was a workhorse in the kitchen and it has been for so many years. And like, it's less about the object itself and more about the memories that are made around the object. For us, I think that a lot of those objects tend to be utilitarian. But like I said, also kind of some of the decorative stuff. Like I love that everywhere I look, it's like a blanket that my grandmother knit or the curtains that she helped me make. And I really hope that by surrounding our boys with things like that, not that I necessarily think that they need to preserve all of it, right? I think
Right.
that's a huge burden to place on someone to say that like all of these things that this person found important are something that I need to hang on to. But what I hope that they take away from it is this respect for their history and their heritage. And then the things that speak to them are the things that they carry on.
Hmm. What is it that you hope, and this could be a loaded question, but what is it that you hope folks visiting, let's even just say your Instagram page or that are interacting with your brand, are there takeaways that you hope are coming across for them there?
Yeah, I mean, I really just hope that people are looking at the way we're using our past to inform our future, the way that we're thinking about our legacy and priorities here, the kitchen, the garden, our home, our family, and kind of using that to inform their own version of home.
Darien, thank you so much for taking the time to be here today. We could have probably talked for hours longer. This is such a fun conversation and topic, and I think much like traditions, the longer you talk about them, the more there is to share. Are you allowed to announce when your YouTube show actually launches?
The YouTube show is launching at the end of May. So,
Okay, awesome.
yeah.
So by the time this episode airs, we should be able to post some kind of link or more
Yeah.
information for
Link to the
everybody, which is
YouTube so you can
exciting.
subscribe and kind of catch all of our episodes as they come out. So between
Perfect.
now and the end of May, we're just going to be kind of doing some like teasers, some behind the scenes, because it really truly has been so fun.
I'm
Like
sure.
I'm having a blast doing it, and so I would really love people to see like how that's kind of all coming together.
I love that. And then the other thing that we talked about, well, we'll talk about or I will share your workshop links. They're sold out now, but
But I am
you
building
have
waitlists.
some kind of, I was just about to
I
ask.
am building waitlists, and I have pulled from waitlists before, so it's not like impossible.
The last thing I want to make sure I link to is the tea. Tell me that was April.
The launch for that is April 26th. So we're going to be
That's so
doing a
fun.
really fun, it will be both available online through Saratoga Tea and Honey, but we're going to do a launch party in the shop on Broadway,
Oh,
which is going to be so fun.
oh, that's awesome. Well, I'll make sure to share, of course, her store link so that people can order, but also if they are local, we can get information together to share, you
Yeah.
know, the
Can we also,
in-person
for
launch.
one quick second, talk about your t-shirt? Because
So I actually am wearing yeah, people can't see it, but I have teacups all over my shirt, which
all
was
over it. It's
so
the
yeah.
painted teacups and
It was a
teapots.
this is a few years old. It's from Talbot's, but yeah, it has little teacups and
I
pots
mean,
all
it could
over.
not be any more appropriate, and I feel like I need
It was
it.
it, and I didn't even think about that today when I put it on. I was just so eager for 3/4 sleeves
Yeah, I
that
know,
I
for
went
like the
for it.
sunshine.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. But yeah, that's perfect timing.
Yeah,
Perfect.
it's
I love it.
wonderful. I love it. It's like another sign. It's like,
It is,
oh,
yeah, there you
good.
go. Another,
Afternoon tea right in my
it
face.
comes in threes, right? So there you go. More
Oh,
teacups. This has been wonderful. Like I said, thank you so much.
thank you so much for having me, Allie. I really appreciate it.